Hi everybody, welcome back to the Car Compulsion YouTube channel. As promised, this is the secondary follow-up video to my first introduction and initial impressions on the M2 competition. Just a quick shout out to everybody that initially watched my first video. I think it's clocked up over 200 views, which to me was amazing. I know in the YouTube grand scheme of things it's small, but I was really impressed. I got some great feedback, some really helpful comments, albeit that most of the views were probably my mum. Shout out to my mum, but still, views are views, and some people sent me some messages saying that they really enjoyed it. So as promised, I'm back with some secondary content around driving the M2 competition. I'm going to take it out today, take it through a few twisties, talk to you a little bit about what it's like to drive, about the characteristics, give you another 3 things about what I really like when it drives, and maybe give you a couple of things that maybe I would improve upon. But to be honest, again, as I said in my first video, there isn't much. I'd like to obviously, go into a little bit more detail around the characteristics of the car from an engine perspective, a handling perspective, take it out, talk to you about my thoughts, and maybe compare it to a couple of the other cars that I've had. Let's get into it. So let's talk about the M2 from a drivability perspective and the kind of functionality you get in the car. As mentioned in my previous video, the M2 competition comes with a detuned version of the M3 M4 engine. It's a 414 brake horsepower, 550 Newton meters of torque, 3-litre straight 6 twin turbo, so it's quite an engine, and it performs as such. It's got brilliant pull. Where you would find it would lack ever so slightly would certainly be in the top end of the range versus the M3 or the M4. From a driving configuration perspective, the M2 has a lot going for it. You can set a variety of different driving modes, whether that's with your steering. You can have comfort, sport, or sport plus. Whether you want to actually change how snappy and how quickly the gearbox responds to you is something you can do also. There are 2 different driving modes. D, driving, which is the stereotypical auto box that will do the shifts for you. You can have that set to D1, D2 or D3. D1 being the more efficient mode, doesn't quite hang on to the gears as much, will change quite quickly. You'll find yourself in 5th gear at around 30 miles an hour. The other one is S for sequential mode. Now S comes in S1, S2, S3, and that is where you have to work the paddles yourself. So if you are going on a particularly sporty drive, you're going on a drive on the track, that would definitely be the mode of choice. And whilst explaining the engine drive modes to you, what better chance than to show you this beautiful engine. The engine itself has 3 specific driving modes: efficient, sport and sport plus. In efficient, the valves on the exhaust remain closed, and in sport the valves open. In sport plus, the valves open. As you can imagine, with each different mode, throttle response increases significantly. Efficient, sport and sport plus, each adding their own level of throttle response. One addition to the M2 that was very different to the original M2 is that you have the ability to program your M1 and M2 buttons. Really good, an easy thing to use, positioned very well on the steering wheel. My M1 button is set up to my daily drive, so I have it set to D1 and efficient. It's when I'm getting up for work in the morning. I'm not really particularly interested in going out and absolutely hammering it. Probably haven't had enough coffee and I don't really want to think, so I put it straight into M1. I also put it into M1 when the car is warming up. If I'm on a road where I feel that I really want to push it, or I have the ability or the inclination to drive in a little bit more of a sportier fashion, my S2 button is set for Sport Plus engine, and my drive mode is set to S2. Now, I picked S2 over S3 specifically because I felt that it was actually a nicer, the changes were nicer. I felt that it actually was a smoother drive, and actually felt that it suited my driving style a little bit more. I know some people will not drive the car in anything but S3 and Sport Plus, but S2 just seemed to suit my driving taste a little bit better. When I tend to push that button, I either tend to be on a B road, or I'll be having a motor moment where I quite fancy putting my foot down within the realms of safety, of course. But having the ability to have those two buttons gives the car real flavour, and the ability that I don't need to fiddle around with the infotainment screen to change over is a massive, massive plus. This baby's got some pull. Having the ability to play with so many driving modes is one of the things that makes the M2 competition such a pleasure to drive. You can set it up pretty much for anything you want. You know, if you want to set it up towards track orientated spec, you can do that. If you want to set it up to just cruise, you can do that. Where I mentioned in my original video that I would have liked a little bit more in regards to sort of configuration is in the suspension, and I know some people will disagree. The M2 competition only has one suspension setting. It's good. It's not quite as good at driving low speeds around town, but when you're out on a road and you're on a B road and you know, you're going a reasonably significant speed, it handles everything very nicely, and there are certainly no complaints. These are the type of roads where the M2 really comes to life. You know, it loves a bend, it loves a twisty, and you know, it handles itself particularly well on these types of roads. You know, it's somewhere where you can go out and have some fun. It can cruise on the motorway. You know, it can do everything that you need it to do for a daily driver, but on roads where you can really put your foot down and where you can really test out the M2 competition, you know, this is where it excels, and this is where you get the best feeling. You know, nothing better than a Sunday going out, Saturday going out, nice drive, you know, lovely weather, nice dry conditions to really put this car through its paces. And that's something that, you know, is, you know, oh, I don't know if you saw that, but that was a pheasant, and that was very close. From a functionality perspective, the M2 competition has everything you would expect from a well-built M2. It's sturdy, very little rattle, not a huge amount of squeaks. You know, everything is put together very nicely. You've got dual zone climate control, heated seats. Some of this stuff will come with an extra package. For example, I expect to have the speed display in the middle of the center dash. Not being able to have a heads-up display in the car is slightly frustrating, and I have had it in a previous car. It's a lovely addition. Mine also comes with Harman Kardon stereo, which is good, but I have to say the upgraded stereo that I had in my Audi was better. It doesn't quite have the depth of bass and the other things that the Audi had with that particular system, but it's good, and it certainly wouldn't, you know, it wouldn't put me off buying the car for that particular reason. Another really handy feature, and one that made me quite laugh, is well, actually it's a very good feature, but the car itself actually has some good safety features on it. It has BMW connected drive at the top, and actually if I was to put my foot down right now and actually spin the car out and put it upside down in a ditch, which is, you know, let's face it, possible in a rear-wheel drive BMW sometimes if you're not being careful, and especially if it's wet. If I end up upside down and my airbags deploy, I will actually receive a phone call on my mobile phone to check I'm okay. The emergency services line will ring me. If I do not respond, they will actually dispatch emergency services to the scene of where I've crashed to make sure I'm okay. Now, hands down, without, you know, that's a brilliant feature, and one that you would never hope would happen, but it's a good one to have nonetheless. So as promised, as always, I'm going to give you the 3 things that I like about the way that this car drives, or 3 things I like about the general drivability, and 3 things that I dislike. So number 1 on the list of positives and the list of likes is the way the car makes you feel. M cars have a good way of making you feel special. This car is no different. The car makes you feel brilliant every time you're in it. It's a pleasure to drive. So my number 1 is the way the car makes you feel when you're driving it. The number 2 thing for me is the functionality of the car, the way the drive modes operate, the fact that I have the ability to change them round to suit the way that I'm feeling with the touch of a button of M1 or M2 on the steering wheel. Massive positive for me. I like the fact I can stick it in a, you know, in easy driving mode, and that I can stick it in efficiency and just cruise along. And I also love the fact that I can then turn it into an absolute animal at the touch of a button, but with the customization to try out different things. The third positive thing for me in the way that the car drives is its ability to make you feel like sometimes you're not in control, but the car does have your back. I like the fact that you have to drive the car and actually show it some respect. I like the fact that you can make mistakes in the car, and I like the fact that it does put you to the test. So what do I dislike when it comes to the functionality around driving this car or the general driving of the car? This gets mentioned a lot in other reviews, and I'll stand by it in this review as well, having just been out and been caught out. The fuel tank is really, really small. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the fuel tank is around 50 litres. It does require filling up quite a lot. It is small and can be frustrating. So number one on the pet hate list is fuel tank size. The second thing I think could be better in this car, and it's something again that's shared with other reviewers and other people that I know that have M2 competitions, it doesn't sound that great. The engine it's a great engine, but it doesn't have a brilliant sound, and a lot of the sound that you get pumped into the cabin is fake, especially in the sportier modes. And whilst it isn't an awful sound, it is an unnatural sound. You can have it coded out. It's not something I've done as of yet, but it's something I may consider in the future. The third thing that I find ever so slightly irritating about the M2 competition is when you're driving it at slower speeds in sportier settings. The gearbox can be a little snatchy, and I did touch upon it very much in my other video, but to give you an indication, like earlier on I was trying to pull out of a roundabout, and I'd left the car in Sport Plus and in S3 driving mode. Actually, it might have been D3, and actually the car judders forward and makes you look like you're about to stall. Nice little cheeky 135i there. There's that 135i again. Sorry, but I really don't rate those compared to the old M140i's. Anyway, if you are in the market for an M2 competition, my advice would be is get yourself down to the nearest BMW garage, test drive one. You will absolutely love it. Can't speak highly of the car enough. It's brilliant. Thanks for joining me on my drive, guys, and taking you through some information around the M2 competition. I hope you found it useful. I appreciate that my reviews probably don't go into as much technical detail as some of the others out there, but I wanted to share my personal thoughts and feelings around why I like the car, why it makes me feel the way that it does, and obviously help potential buyers maybe with some of the questions that a normal guy may be able to just help them with. I don't have a fleet of supercars, and I don't have money to be buying different cars every week. So, this is an important car to me, and I love it, and I'm pleased I've been able to share some of the information with you. More content coming on the channel in the future. It won't just be a BMW orientated content, although there will be a lot of own content around my car, hoping to get some cars on in the future, and obviously share some more thoughts around this particular car. Thanks again. Please like and subscribe, and I really appreciate the support.